security guard named Bobby Smallwood was killed on a post at a hospital. His family sued for $35 million. I'm not telling you that to shock you. I'm telling you because it exposes the real math of this industry. How much is a guard's life worth? Not morally, on paper. Let's follow the numbers. Let's start with the cleanest baseline we have, what guards actually earn. The Bureau of Labor Statistics lists the median annual wage for security guards at $38,370 as of 2024. Median means half of guards make more, half make less. Now turn that into real-life math. If you translate $38,370 into an hourly number at full-time hours, you land right around $18.45 an hour. That number matters because it tells you what the market thinks a guard is worth in normal conditions. But contract security isn't about worth, it's about risk. In contract security, the client pays one number and you get another. That gap is the business model. Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you just ask for the bill rate. Real talk, most companies aren't going to hand a guard the bill rate of an account. That's internal, that's contract level info. If you ask, you get a smile and a non-answer, if not laughed out of the office. So instead, we use industry examples. A security industry write-up from Silvertrac summarizes pay versus bill rates for commercial contracts and gives a simple example. Median pay around $15 an hour and median bill rate around $23 an hour. That's an $8 an hour spread. That spread isn't just profit. It's payroll taxes, workers' comp, insurance, supervision, recruiting, admin, scheduling, uniforms, training, and margin. But here's the part that hits. The client might be paying $23 an hour for security, and a guard is getting $15 an hour to physically exist inside the risk. That's your role in the machine. If you want to understand why that gap exists, don't argue online. Look at how security contracts are built. OfficerReports says the best way to understand what bidders are actually providing is to request a line item breakdown of the billing rate, and that the billing rate should include at minimum wages and other cost components. And Overton Security lays it out in plain English. Bill rate is wages plus overhead and the cost required to operate the contract, not just whatever someone feels like charging. Now here's the important shift. Your leverage is not getting the bill rate. Your leverage is understanding the site environment and the laws well enough to force the people above you to take risks seriously, because if you don't know the rules, you're walking in blind. Now we get to the part that makes people uncomfortable. If a guard dies, quits, gets hurt, or walks off a dangerous post, how much does it cost the company to replace them? Because this tells you how organizations quietly price your existence. A commonly cited benchmark, summarized by Workable, is that replacing an employee can cost about 6 to 9 months of that employee's salary once you add recruiting, onboarding, and training costs. Let's apply that to median guard pay. Median pay is $38,370 a year. 6 months is around $19,185. 9 months is about $28,778. That's the HR cost to replace the worker. Now add the security industry reality. Turnover is brutal. A TrackForce retention guide says reports show security guard turnover rates can be as high as 100% annually, and ACES has covered guard force turnover as a major challenge for providers, meaning a lot of companies already operate like replacement is normal. So when a company is deciding whether to improve a risky site, extra staffing, better equipment, real training, versus just replace the guard, they're doing an ugly calculation. Fixing the post has to cost less than replacement, less than contract risk, and less than regulatory pain. That's why polite internal emails do less than nothing. Not because the operations manager is evil, because the incentives are built to ignore you until something hurts. So you need leverage that hurts. Let's talk about what happens when the worst happens. In Portland, Oregon, a security guard named Bobby Smallwood was shot and killed at Legacy Good Samaritan Medical Center. His family sued the facility for $35 million, alleging negligence and failure to respond to known danger signals over multiple days. Now, I'm not here to litigate the case. I'm here to show you the pattern. Before tragedy, safety is expensive. After tragedy, the money shows up instantly. Lawsuit money, settlement money, PR money, policy change money. The system suddenly discovers urgency after blood forces it. Now, here's the part where the math somehow gets even more insulting. The U.S. Department of Transportation uses a concept called the value of a statistical life for policy analysis. In its guidance, DOT's VSL estimate is $13.7 million for analyses using a base year of 2024. So in the world of regulations, infrastructure, and safety planning, saving a life can justify spending millions. But in the world where guards actually stand in the doorway and absorb the chaos, the day-to-day spending doesn't even rhyme with that number. That's not a conspiracy. That's priorities, budgets, and risk being outsourced down the ladder. Alright, if you're a guard watching this, what can you do? Not stay safe, not be careful, actual steps that create that leverage. Action 1 is learn the environment like it's a test. You don't need the bill rate, you need the risk profile. If your post is basically you're alone and the public has full access, then you better understand what you're walking into, because nobody is going to hand you a warning label. Action 2, know the laws that protect your time and your body. Labor law is leverage. If you don't know break requirements, overtime rules, training rules, and wage rules, you can't even recognize when you're being set up to fail. For example, New York's Department of Labor complaint process explicitly includes things like no meal period as a possible labor standards violation. New York also publishes guidance around day of rest and meal periods and explains how to file related complaints. Action 3, build a risk receipt designed for regulators. 1 page, no emotion, just facts. This isn't for your supervisor. This is for documentation when you need to escalate. Action 4, use OSHA the right way. If the job site has unsafe conditions, OSHA explains how workers can file a complaint online, by phone or by letter, and that you can file anonymously for safety and health complaints. And OSHA also lays out steps for refusing dangerous work, because doing it sloppily can get you fired. Action 5, wage theft and break violations aren't personal problems. They're enforcement problems. The U.S. Department of Labor Wage and Hour Division explains how to file a complaint, including a phone option at 1-866-487-9243. And worker.gov breaks down that complaints get routed to a local office and they may contact you within 2 business days. Action 6, unionize or support one, because a single guard has almost no leverage. A group does. The National Labor Relations Board explains that if at least 30% of workers sign cards or a petition, the NLRB can conduct an election. If a majority votes yes, the NLRB certifies the union for bargaining. And I already made a video on this, Helpless Alone, Unstoppable Together, Security Guard Unions. Here's a quick recap of why unions help. Safety becomes enforceable contract language. Retaliation becomes harder. Pay stops being manager vibes. Scheduling and breaks become enforceable instead of optional. Collective leverage forces action before tragedy does. This video isn't guards should be millionaires. It's this. If institutions rely on guards as a safety layer, then they need to stop treating guards like disposable parts, because the pattern is predictable. Before tragedy, we can't afford it. After tragedy, we're making changes. No, pay for safety before blood makes it worth it. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more guard guides, and be safe.